I destroyed my 17-year marriage. For nothing. Now, my husband won't talk to me. Unless our daughters are in the room. Yeah, that's my life now. Sounds bad when you put it like that, right? I'm Eliza, 43, and I swear I never saw my life turning into this. This cheap daytime soap opera. Everyone always said Julian and I were the perfect couple. The blueprint. 17 years of marriage, 2 incredible daughters, and a beautiful home in a neighborhood people actually fought to get into. We were that couple. The one everyone looked at and whispered. Relationship goals. Julian was always the guy who remembered anniversaries without a calendar alert. The one who'd show up with my favorite pad thai after I'd had a brutal day at the office, without me even having to ask. When Clara and Tessa were little, he'd invent daddy adventure days just to get them out of the house so I could have a few hours of blessed silence to myself. He was the husband who actually listened. I mean really listened. When I complained about the petty drama with my boss. He was the husband who rubbed my feet after I insisted on wearing those killer 4-inch heels for our 15th anniversary dinner, the ones I loved even though they murdered my arches. For that anniversary, he planned this entire weekend getaway to a quiet inn by the coast. Everything, every single detail, was curated just for me. My friends were so jealous they could barely hide it behind their smiles. We had the matching SUVs in the driveway, the professionally taken family photos on the walls, the inside jokes that no one else understood. From the outside, we were flawless. We were the couple other couples would pull aside at neighborhood cookouts for advice. How do you two still look at each other like that after all these years? They'd ask. And I'd just smile that knowing, smug little smile, while Julian's arm slipped around my waist, his touch a familiar comfort. When other wives complained about their husbands leaving wet towels on the bed or forgetting important dates, I'd nod sympathetically, all while secretly feeling superior. Julian wasn't like other husbands. He was attentive, thoughtful. He was exactly what I'd always thought I wanted. At least, that's what I thought. But somewhere around year 15, this restlessness started to creep in. A quiet hum of discontent that I couldn't name. The predictability that once felt so secure, so safe, started to feel stifling, suffocating. I knew exactly what Julian would say before he said it. I could anticipate his every move, his every thought. Date nights became just another routine, different restaurant, same conversation. Our intimacy, it was like a choreographed dance we had performed 1,000 times before. It wasn't bad. It was just known. Too known. I started noticing little things that grated on my nerves. The way he cleared his throat twice before starting a sentence. How he always had to check that the front door was locked 3 times before we went to bed. His predictable, measured reactions to everything. God, the predictability was drowning me. I'd look at him across the dinner table, listening to him talk about his day at work, and this terrifying thought would echo in my head. Is this really it? Is this all there is for the next 30 years? I never said anything, though. Of course not. What kind of ungrateful witch complains about a husband who's actually nice? A husband who is a good man? So instead, I smiled, I nodded. I played my part as the happily married wife, all while feeling like I was slowly, invisibly disappearing. I started spending more time at the office, volunteering for extra projects that would keep me busy and away from home. I told myself I was advancing my career, but really, I was just avoiding the crushing sameness of my perfect life. The girls were teenagers by then. Clara was 16 and Tessa was 14. Both of them were lost in their own orbits of friends and high school activities and social media drama. They needed me less, and that left more time for me to dwell on my own dissatisfaction. I'd look at the younger women at work, single and carefree, and I'd feel this sharp twinge of something that tasted a lot like envy. I started paying more attention to my appearance, updating my wardrobe, getting a new, edgier haircut that made me look younger. Julian noticed, of course. He complimented me, seemed pleased. "You look amazing, Han," he'd say, and I'd feel a fleeting moment of warmth before the restlessness crept back in. I wanted more. A bigger reaction. More passion. More something. I started to wonder if anyone new, would look at me and feel that spark I was missing so desperately. And then Leo started at the office. Leo wasn't particularly handsome, not in a classic sense. He wasn't charming or witty at first glance. He wasn't even my type, really. But he looked at me. He looked at me like he actually saw me. Not Eliza the wife, not Eliza the mom, but Eliza the woman. When we were assigned to the same project, I found myself lingering after meetings, making excuses to collaborate. We started getting coffee together, then lunch. Just colleagues, I told myself. Just friends. Until we weren't just friends anymore. The first time was after a late night at the office. Everyone else had gone home. We were hunched over a spreadsheet, reviewing numbers that absolutely had to be perfect for the next day's big presentation. He reached for the same printed file that I did. Our hands touched. And suddenly, 17 years of marriage. 17 years of predictability, just vaporized in the electric heat of something new. Something forbidden. I told myself it was just a mistake. A moment of weakness. But then it happened again. And again. I became someone I didn't recognize. Sneaking around, making up excuses to work late, deleting texts and call logs, creating elaborate, exhausting lies. The affair with Leo lasted 6 months. 6 months of living a double life. 6 months of feeling more alive, more seen than I had in years. While simultaneously carrying the crushing, corrosive weight of betrayal, I justified it in 1,000 different ways. Julian had grown complacent. We'd lost our spark. I deserved to feel desired like this. The mental gymnastics I performed to make myself the victim instead of the villain, they were truly Olympic level. Looking back now, I see the signs. I see that Leo wasn't actually interested in me as a person. He was younger, ambitious. He probably saw sleeping with a senior manager as a shortcut, a way to advance his career. But in the moment, the attention was intoxicating. Every compliment, every stolen kiss in the stairwell, every secret hotel meeting. It felt like my first breath of air after being held underwater for years. After years of slowly suffocating, I convinced myself I was falling in love with him. Maybe I even believed it for a while. I got sloppy, though. The thrill made me reckless. One night, I left my phone unlocked on the bedside table while I took a shower. And Julian saw a text from Leo that couldn't be misinterpreted. "Still thinking about last night. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Not exactly subtle. When I got out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, Julian was sitting on the edge of the bed. My phone was in his hand. He looked like someone had just told him his entire family had died in a fire. I will never, ever forget his expression. This horrific mixture of shock, pain, and worst of all, a complete lack of surprise. Like some small, intuitive part of him had been waiting for me to do this. Waiting for me to finally hurt him in a way he could never fix. "How long?" he asked. His voice was so flat, so devoid of any emotion, it scared me more than if he'd been screaming his head off. I tried to lie at first. Claimed it was nothing. Just flirty texts, a stupid crush that got out of hand. But Julian just stared at me with those devastated, hollow eyes until the truth finally, shamefully spilled out of me. Not all of it, of course. I minimized where I could. I made it sound more like an emotional affair than a physical one. I tried to paint myself as confused and lost, rather than calculating and selfish. But enough of the truth came out that night to shatter everything we had ever built. I thought Julian would yell, break things, storm out. That's what happens in the movies, right? Instead, he just sat there, nodding slightly, as if I was just confirming something he'd suspected all along. When I finished my pathetic, rambling confession, he stood up, walked to the guest room, and closed the door behind him. The quiet that followed, that absolute, deafening silence, was worse than any screaming could have been. The next day, everything imploded at work, too. Julian had apparently spent the night going through all my messages and emails. He'd forwarded the most damning ones to himself, and then contacted our company's HR department. By noon, both Leo and I had been called into separate offices and fired for violating the company's policy on workplace relationships. As we cleared out our desks, Leo wouldn't even look at me. Just like that, we were strangers again. That night, I tried to talk to Julian. I cried. I begged. I promised it would never happen again. He just watched me perform my remorse with those same empty eyes before saying, "The girls can't know about this. We'll figure out what to do. But they can't know their mother is a cheater." The word, cheater, it hit me like a physical slap. I wanted to argue, to explain that it was more complicated than that our marriage had problems long before Leo. But one look at Julian's face, and I knew there was no point. In his mind, the world was now split into two distinct eras, before I cheated and after, and nothing in between mattered anymore. For weeks, I tried everything to make things right. I scrambled and got a new job quickly, desperate to show him I was being responsible. I started therapy, hoping he'd see I was working on myself. I left little notes around the house, the way I used to when we were first married. I tried initiating sex. God, that was a disaster. He literally recoiled from my touch, turned his back on me, and walked out of the room without a word. The only time Julian would engage with me at all was when Clara or Tessa was in the room. Then, suddenly, he'd transform. He'd become a reasonable facsimile of his former self. Pleasant, conversational, even occasionally smiling. Our daughters had no idea anything was wrong. That's how good his act was. But the second they left the room, it was like a switch flipped, and I became invisible again. The silence would descend, thick and suffocating. About 2 months in, I got desperate. I'd always known Julian had fantasies, things he'd mentioned in passing over the years that he'd never fully expressed. So, one night, after the girls were asleep, I made the most cringeworthy, misguided suggestion of my life. I suggested we try an open marriage. Just for him, I said. I told him I'd understand if he wanted to see other women, that maybe it would help him get past what I'd done. I even offered to arrange it. God. I shudder remembering this, but I actually suggested I could find women for him. That maybe we could even try a threesome, if that would make him happy. I thought I was being generous. Evolved, offering him the same freedom I'd already taken for myself. Instead, he looked at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Is that really what you think this is about?" he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "That I'm jealous? That I just want permission to cheat too?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't want an open marriage, Eliza. I don't want other women." He paused, and his next words were like shards of ice. "I wanted a wife who respected our vows." Then he delivered the ultimatum. "If you ever mention anything like this again, open marriages, threesomes, any of it, I will file for divorce immediately, no matter what it costs me. Do you understand?" He wasn't bluffing. I could see it in his eyes. That's when I finally began to realize how badly I'd misjudged not just the situation, but who Julian was as a person. I had projected my own shallow dissatisfaction onto him, assumed his needs were as hollow as mine had become. I tried bringing up couples therapy. To my surprise, Julian agreed, but the therapist's office was just another stage for our performance. Julian would answer questions politely. He'd go through the exercises. He even completed the homework assignments. But there was nothing behind it. No real desire to reconnect. Just mechanical compliance. After the sessions, he'd go right back to his silent treatment at home. Months passed like this. A year. I lost weight. I couldn't sleep. I developed a constant humming anxiety that made my chest feel tight all the time. Meanwhile, Julian seemed to be fine. He even seemed to be thriving. He got a promotion at his new job. He started going to the gym regularly and got into the best shape of his life. He took the girls on weekend trips to give you some space, he'd say in front of them, as if he was being considerate instead of just actively avoiding me. I found myself frantically checking his phone when he wasn't looking, convinced he must be having an affair of his own. A revenge affair. But there was nothing. No suspicious texts, no unexplained absences. It was almost disappointing, having no ammunition to use against him. Nothing to make us even. The worst part was watching him with Clara and Tessa. He was still the same loving, devoted father he'd always been. Helping with homework, attending school events, making his famous pancakes on Sunday mornings. They adored him, completely unaware that when they weren't looking, their father couldn't stand to be in the same room as their mother. "Why are you putting so much effort into pretending?" I finally asked him one night, my voice raw with desperation after the girls went to bed. "Why not just tell them the truth and leave if you hate me so much?" Julian looked at me for a long, quiet moment before answering. "Because unlike you, Eliza, I don't make choices based solely on what I want in the moment." His words were calm, measured, and utterly devastating. Our daughters deserve an intact home until they're ready to leave it. After that, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. It's been almost 2 years since D-Day, as they call it on the infidelity support forums I've started browsing in my loneliness. 2 years of living with a man who is physically present but emotionally a million miles away. 2 years of maintaining our perfect couple facade for the neighbors, for our families, for our daughters. Clara is going to college next year. Tessa will follow 2 years after that. The clock is ticking on whatever remains of my marriage. And I know it. I've tried everything. Apologies, seduction, guilt, anger, indifference. Nothing penetrates the wall Julian has built between us. Sometimes I catch him looking at me when he thinks I won't notice. There's no hate in his eyes anymore, which is almost worse. There's just nothing. Complete indifference. Like I'm a piece of furniture. A stranger he's sharing space with temporarily. The husband who used to notice every new outfit, every haircut, now looks through me as if I'm not even there. Last week, I was looking for a warranty paper in his desk drawer. I found a folder. Inside were financial planning documents. Printouts of apartments for rent in the city, near his office. And a consultation receipt from a divorce attorney, dated just 3 weeks after he discovered the affair. He's been planning his exit for almost 2 years. Just waiting for the right moment. And I realize that while I've been desperately trying to perform CPR on something that's already dead, Julian has been patiently, methodically building his escape route. The most painful part, the part that twists in my gut every single day, is that I still love him. Or at least, I love the man he was. The life we had. I miss the easy comfort of his arms around me at night. The sound of his deep laugh. The way he used to look at me, like I was his entire world. I threw it all away. For what? A few months of fleeting excitement with a man who didn't even bother to contact me after we were both fired. Last night, Julian actually spoke to me directly for the first time in weeks. When the girls weren't around, I mean. "I'm taking Tessa shopping for a homecoming dress tomorrow," he said. His tone was perfectly neutral, like he was talking to a casual acquaintance. "She wants both of us there. Can you make it?" "Of course," I said, pathetically grateful for this tiny crumb of normal interaction. "I wouldn't miss it." He nodded and turned to leave the room. "Julian," I called after him, my voice catching in my throat. He paused in the doorway, his back still to me. "Will it ever get better?" I whispered. Will you ever forgive me?" For a moment, I thought he might not answer. Then, he spoke, his voice soft but clear. "I've already forgiven you, Eliza," he said finally. "I had to, for my own peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean staying." He left without looking back, leaving me alone with the truth I've been avoiding for 2 years. My marriage is over, It's been over since the moment I decided my vows were less important than my fleeting desires. In 3 months, Clara graduates. In 5, she leaves for college. And then the countdown truly begins. I see my future stretching out before me. Divorce papers. Selling our beautiful home. Dividing our possessions. Watching Julian start a new life without me, while I'm left with nothing but regret and the ghosts of what we once had. Sometimes, I fantasize about going back in time. Stopping myself from sending that first flirty message to Leo. From staying late at the office that night. From crossing lines that can never be uncrossed. But time only moves forward, and actions have consequences. Mine certainly did. The night Julian found those texts, he asked me a question I couldn't answer then. He just looked at me, his face a mask of pain, and whispered, "Was it worth it?" 2 years later, as I lie alone in our king-size bed while he sleeps in the guest room, I finally have my answer. Nothing could be worth this hollow, aching emptiness. This slow-motion collapse of everything I once held dear. I made my choice, and now I'm living with it. Every day, I watch my husband pretend to still be my husband, all while planning his escape. Every night, I go to sleep knowing I single-handedly destroyed something precious that can never be rebuilt. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I have no one to blame but myself. Though God knows I've tried to distribute that blame elsewhere. To Julian, for being too predictable. To Leo, for pursuing me. To my job, for the stressful environment that pushed me toward bad decisions. The truth is simpler, and so much harder to face. I was selfish. I wanted excitement without consequences. I thought I could have everything: the stability of my marriage and the thrill of an affair. Instead, I ended up with nothing but a countdown to the day Julian finally walks away for good. 3 months until graduation. 5 months until Clara leaves for college. 24 months until Tessa follows. And then I'll truly understand the full cost of what I've done. When the facade finally falls away for good, and I'm left standing alone in the ruins of the life I destroyed. I never thought it would actually happen. Not really. Even with all the signs, all the evidence, some small, stupid part of me believed Julian would forgive me eventually. Truly forgive me. That somehow, we'd find our way back to each other. But last week, Clara graduated. We sat side by side in the audience, clapping and cheering as she walked across the stage in her cap and gown. Julian's parents were there. My parents, too. All of us playing our parts in this happy family parade. After the ceremony, as we posed for pictures, Julian's arm around my shoulder felt like a stranger's, heavy and obligatory. His smile never reached his eyes when he looked at me, though it was genuine enough when he hugged Clara. We hosted a small party at the house. Our last event as a complete family unit, though no one else knew that. That night, after everyone had left and the girls had gone to bed, Julian handed me an envelope. Inside were divorce papers. Already filled out, just waiting for my signature. "I've been more than fair with the financial arrangements," he said, his voice matter of fact, like we were discussing a business transaction. "You can keep the house until Tessa graduates if you want. Or we can sell it now and split the proceeds. I've already found an apartment downtown." I just stared at him, the heavy paper cold in my hands. The reality was finally, brutally, sinking in. "You're really doing this," I whispered. "After all this time, you're still leaving." "I told you I would," he replied, with no anger in his voice. "Just certainty. I stayed for the girls, Eliza. Clara's an adult now. Tessa will understand." "You don't have to do this," I pleaded, tears finally welling up, hot and useless. "We can still work it out. People recover from affairs all the time." Julian looked at me with something that was almost like pity. "This isn't about the affair anymore, Eliza," he said softly. "It's about the fact that I don't trust you. I don't even know you." He took a slow breath. "The woman I married wouldn't have done what you did. And she certainly wouldn't have suggested I sleep with other women to make things even. This marriage has been over for 2 years. I've just been waiting for the right time to make it official. He moved out the next day, while Tessa was at a friend's house. He took only what he needed for his new apartment and said we could figure out the rest later. When Tessa came home and found out, she was devastated, and she blamed me. Immediately. Somehow knowing, instinctively, that whatever had happened was my fault. Julian never told her about the affair. He kept his promise on that. But she's 16, not stupid. She's barely spoken a full sentence to me since. Within weeks, the news of our separation spread through our social circle. I tried to control the narrative, suggesting we'd just grown apart. But then came the final blow. Julian started dating. Not casually, not playing the field like I might have expected, but seriously dating one woman. Someone from his office, I later found out. Nora. Even her name sounds wholesome and trustworthy. The first time I saw them together was at a restaurant downtown. I was having lunch with a friend when they walked in. Hand in hand. Julian looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. My friend noticed them too, then glanced at me with pity. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. I just shook my head, unable to speak past the massive lump that had formed in my throat. After that, the story began to shift. People stopped inviting me to gatherings where Julian would be present. Friends we'd had for years slowly, politely, drifted toward him. Even my own parents, who'd initially been supportive of me, started making comments. About second chances. About how Julian seems to be doing so well since he met Nora at Tessa's tennis match. 8 months after moving out, Julian proposed to Nora. Tessa told me. Her voice was a strange mix of teenage excitement and quiet accusation. "Dad's getting married again. Nora's really nice. She actually listens when I talk." The divorce was finalized last month. Julian and Nora are getting married in the spring. Tessa has asked to live with them after the wedding. Clara calls from college, but when she's home, she visits her father's apartment. She only stops by the house out of a sense of obligation. The beautiful home that was once filled with love and laughter now feels like an empty museum of a life that no longer exists. I finally got the answers to the questions I was too afraid to ask before. Julian hadn't been secretly planning his exit from the very beginning. He told me during our last real conversation, a stilted meeting at a coffee shop to sign the final papers. He genuinely tried to forgive me in those first few months. It was my behavior afterward that killed any chance of reconciliation. The manipulation. The suggestion of an open marriage. The refusal to take full, unadulterated responsibility. As he put it, his voice calm but firm. "You weren't sorry you cheated, Eliza. You were just sorry you got caught." He was right. He was absolutely right. I wasn't truly remorseful, not at first. I was just desperate to avoid the consequences, to keep my comfortable, perfect life intact. By the time I finally, truly understood what I'd really lost, it was far, far too late. I ran into Leo last week, the first time since we were both fired. He's married now, too, to someone younger. He barely acknowledged me beyond a curt, awkward nod. The passionate, life-altering affair that I destroyed my family for wasn't even memorable enough for him to feel awkward seeing me again. Just another conquest in his rearview mirror. So, here I am, alone in a house too big for one person. Surrounded by photos on the walls that I can't bear to look at but can't bring myself to take down. The divorce settlement was generous. Julian always was a better person than me. But money doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't call just to check if you're okay. It doesn't remember your favorite flavor of ice cream. It doesn't hold your hand through good news and bad. I thought the worst consequence of my affair would be Julian's anger. I was wrong. His indifference was so much worse than his anger. And now this new reality. Watching him build a happy, wonderful life with someone else, while mine crumbles into dust. This is the true punishment. not because he intended it that way, but because it's the natural, inevitable result of the choices I made. Sometimes, on my darkest nights, I take out my phone and hover over Julian's number. I compose texts I never send. What would I even say? That I'm sorry? He's heard that 1,000 times. That I miss him? That would only burden him with guilt he doesn't deserve. That I still love him? That stopped being relevant the moment I betrayed him. So instead, I live with my regrets. I smile through Tessa's increasingly rare visits. I send Clara care packages at college. I go to work. I come home. I eat dinner alone, and I wonder how I could have been so blind. So selfish. So utterly sure that the grass was greener somewhere else, when I already had everything that mattered right here. Julian asked me once if it was worth it. The answer haunts me every single day. Nothing was worth this. Nothing ever could be.